Hi, I'm Greg Wells. I got to work with Paul right when George Bush was elected into office. Thank you. And, I'm a Canadian socialist, so we had a lot in common. And there's so many stories I want to tell. Hold on. I got to open with this one. So as soon as I got work as a record producer, I wanted to work with Paul. And got to in the early 2000s. It was really right around whenever W got into office. And we hit it off, and he heard me play a little bit of piano and realized that we could kind of speak the same language, and we just had a click and sort of a shorthand. But a repeating pattern would happen. After every session I was lucky enough to do with Paul, we would have, at minimum, a 2-hour conversation after the session about the horrors of the Republican Party. And I noticed that every subsequent session, another 30 minutes would get added on. And it was the most electrifying, incredible conversation, no filler, all hard content and brilliant and tons of lateral thinking and very open-minded. But the conversations were like getting over 3 hours. I mean, really, many of them out here in the hallway. And so it was 2005, and I was producing a young band called One Republic, and they had this song called Apologize. And I said we should hire Paul Buckmaster to do the strings on Apologize. So they didn't have much of a budget. It wound up becoming one of the biggest singles in the history of radio, but we didn't know that was going to happen. So he brought in 8 string players to my little drum room at my studio in Culver City. And I had warned the band, unless you want to really get into a long, deep conversation with Paul, when the session's over, don't bring up politics. If you want to go there, bring it up. But if you don't, and these guys were a lot younger than me, and they're like, okay, we won't bring it up. The session went great. Paul wrote the most beautiful chart. By the way, everyone thinks Timbaland produced that song, which is a nice problem to have. But the first version was the one we did at my studio, and then One Republic got dropped brilliantly by Columbia. Tim Devine, who I'm going to tell another story, but Tim Devine relating to Paul, which helped Paul win the Grammy for Drops of Jupiter. Tim Devine didn't like the new president of Columbia, so he quit. He said, I'm not going to answer to that guy. That new president lasted 10 months anyway. One Republic got dropped, Katy Perry got dropped, 50 Cent, Jonas Brothers, people that have made, I don't know, $1 billion probably for whatever record label they. So they were dropped, and I'm sorry, I'm getting all tangential. I've had 2 glasses of wine. One Republic signed to Timbaland's label after they got dropped. They got picked up by him. Timbaland released that song on his record. And then their original version came out too, and both versions became a hit. And Paul's string arrangement is just stunning on it. So anyway, the session went great. We were done, and I'm kind of looking at the band like, okay, just don't. Like, okay. And Paul said, thank you. We all said, thank you very much. And he left, and he walked down the hallway, and he made it to the end of my studio hallway. And then he stopped, and I heard him yell out, did you say the name of this band was One Republic? And I yelled out, yes! Just buckling in, And he came back, and he just blocked the doorway of my control room. And it was 2.5 hours of America used to be a great republic, and it was the most, he kind of schooled those guys. I'm sure they didn't know 1/10 of what he was saying, but it was this amazing history lesson, and, far more than any of us bargained for, but it was amazing. It was classic Paul. Anyway, Duke Ellington said there's good music and then there's the other stuff, right? Paul, I'm probably going to start crying talking about this, but Paul is on a very short list, at least that I found in my experience, of people who, like myself, have a big classical and jazz background, but also, for whatever dysfunctional reason, love the popular song. And I actually think the popular song is the hardest thing to get right. I think it's easier to be complicated. I think it's very hard to get something simple in a small frame at a level of excellence. It's almost impossible. I've definitely never done it, but it's the only thing that I chase. And Paul, who could wipe the floor with all of us, with his little fingernail, loved a great song. He loved it. He loved it as deeply as I do. I've really only met a couple other people that fit that bill, like Burt Bacharach or Quincy Jones. They're deeply storied people who have marinated in the classics for decades. But I think it's important recognizing that Paul was really a master. Capital M, big capital M. He was a master, and he brought that authoritative, singular storytelling voice of his to any of us that were lucky enough to work with him.